originally from the West Coast. So I was born and raised out in Vancouver in British Columbia.
Oh yeah.
So that's where I sort of, grew up. And yeah, I always wanted to, right after, right from when I was in high school through university, I wanted to have that experience where you could sort of bust out on your own and sort of like see what you have, see what if you have what it takes to sort of carve out a life for yourself, right? So that was sort of intrinsically one of the things that motivated a lot of what I did before moving to Toronto. But I actually had a really good friend that moved out here a few years prior. And so, just came out here to visit her a few times. And, through those visits, just walking around through some of the streets and really starting to appreciate the vibe that the city has had. So it was only a matter of time before I moved out here. And I've been out here for 8 years now. And I mean, barring the pandemic that the whole world is dealing with, I really like it here. Very diverse. Lots of different scenes here, lots of different music here as well. So I credit a lot of what I'm doing from living here in Toronto.
Great. And do you perform live as well? Is that something that you've been doing before pandemic times, or is that something yet to come?
So it's funny. Well, it's funny and it's not funny because I put out an EP in 2019, and that was meant to sort of symbolize and, I don't know, herald the launch of this independent music career that I was building. And then 2020 was going to be the year that I was performing live.
Right.
And we all know. Yeah. Right. So like any artist, we've all had to adjust. I've done a few virtual, I think I did about 2 virtual performances, actually with a good friend of mine back in BC, which I guess is sort of the beauty of doing everything digitally and virtually now. So I did do that, but I wasn't able to sort of, dive back into live music performing. So hopefully later this year or next year. But prior to that, I guess where I got my start was, I feel like a lot of people, they start off by just getting up at a karaoke night and then realizing, hey, this is fun. I really like this. And then it sort of graduates into, somebody that performs at a house band, and then you get them to call you up to sing a song, and then you really get a taste for it and you think, oh, this is actually really great. And that's a really sort of way of how I started cutting my teeth in terms of live music. When I was in Vancouver, I was regularly performing with some of the house bands in the downtown core. I've been taking vocal lessons on and off for the last, I'd say 10 years. And there would be showcase nights through the organizations that I'd be training with. So that was good experience. When I moved out here to Toronto at the time, they were doing this televised regional singing songwriting competition, structured very much like your reality TV shows you see now, like American Idol and all that, right? And I thought, well, why not? So I put in an audition tape. I suppose they liked what they saw, and so I competed in this competition. And it was primarily the only thing was it had to be original compositions.
Okay.
And I ended up becoming a finalist, and that was pretty great. We actually performed at World Pride the year it was hosted here. That was quite a memorable moment. That is easily the largest audience I've ever performed in front of to date, but hoping to change that. We'll see if coronavirus will allow that.
More to come. That's cool. So what year was that?
More to come. So that was actually in 2014. So it's been quite a while. So since then, again, 2020 was the year that I was going to come back and start performing live again. So,
hey, it will happen. But you've managed to still be releasing stuff and connecting with people, I guess, during this time, which is cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure you can probably attest to this as well. Living in the current climate, in lockdown, living alone, this music community has played a huge role in sort of helping weather some of the rougher moments of living by yourself. So I owe a lot to the relationships that I've built, through social media, but just the connections that I've been able to establish, and just the oddly enough, some really, really good friendships that I've developed. And it's always funny that when I realize, like, I have not even met these people.
Yeah.
I've had a proper face-to-face conversation.
Yeah, no, it totally. Yeah, I feel very much the same. And yeah, it's been really lovely. I've been a really lovely part of doing this as well, which kind of came randomly out of last year. Um, that kind of creating a playlist of queer music kind of turned into a radio show, and doing some interviews, and yeah, all these people that I've kind of now, I feel like I've met, but obviously just over Zoom, but from all across the world. Definitely, that would not have actually happened in real if I wasn't in lockdown in the current climate that we're in. So there's definitely some positives to take from it all as well.
Yeah, you gotta be able to look at the good. And for me, I put out my previous single that I released last summer. It's just, I'm very proud of that single, but given everything that was going on in the world, I very much expected that this is going to be a very quiet release. And I didn't expect that it would sort of be the catalyst that would get me introduced and so plugged in to this music community, of these really, really talented queer indie artists, and it's just completely changed just how I listen to music. And just a lot of it's just sort of changed my own approach towards how I even think about like future projects that I'm like currently mulling over in the back of my head. So again, a lot of it, it's just been a lot of wonderful things that have happened just in terms of the connections that I've built with some really, really fantastic artists.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. It's exciting. It's nice to feel like you're part of a community as well. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So let's take it back. Take it back a few years. Da, da, da. What about early musical inspiration? So I definitely sense a love of kind of some synths and 80s in your music. But tell me a little bit about some
Yeah.
early inspirations.
Um, so I mean, if we really want to go way back,
Let's go. Story time.
sure. I mean, as an elder millennial, as somebody who was
An
from
elder
from the
millennial.
early, an elder millennial.
What does that?
um,
Where does that begin and end? I don't
I'm not falling for that because I'm going to tell you how old I am.
know. Damn
Oh, I don't care. No, I was born in 1983.
it.
So
1983.
I'm not old, but I'm no spring chicken.
That's not old at all. I'm
um,
87, so there you
you were born in 87.
go.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a really good, fresh-looking 87-year-old.
That is a very good skincare
Yeah,
regimen.
thank you. It's my secret, I can tell you.
Exactly. I distinctly remember my dad when I was about 4 or 5 years old, like made me go downstairs into like the basement of the house that we were growing up in, and he had all of these like records, like vinyl LPs and all that, right?
So,
And he was just like, "I'm in, come here, sit down." And me at the time, I was like, "I want to go outside. I want to go run around with everybody else." And he's just started like handing me all these records. And it was like the Beatles, it was Fleetwood Mac, it was the Rolling Stones, it was Pink Floyd, right? So a lot of that, it's sort of, I think I was the only kid my age that used to run around with a little portable cassette player, just blasting the Beatles. They're like classic Lennon McCartney hits, right? So,
mhm.
played a huge role in just a very, very early love for very like classic pop tunes, right? And just like developing an understanding of like what's a hook, what's a verse, what's a bridge, and a
Yeah.
pre-chorus and all that, right? Um, fast forward to university, and like, I was a university student. I feel like, one of the things that a lot of people do when they're in their early 20s, they just they carry the music acts that they love almost as like a badge of honor. It's just so ingrained in your identity, right? So through school, I just completely fell in love with pop music. And so this would have been around the late 90s, you know, so anybody who came of age during that era, you know, there was, what was it? I mean, there was the boy band craze at the time, but there was, you know, there were elements of that that I really enjoyed, you know. A lot of people like to write off the bubblegum pop music that came out at the time, but I challenge anybody to go back and listen to Baby One More Time by Britney Spears and not say that is a fantastic pop song.
Yes. I mean, a classic of the genre.
It is classic. Like when you know
It's
what
classic
the song
pop
is, just
writing.
yeah, when you know the song immediately just by the opening 3 notes,
Right.
a classic pop song.
Yeah.
But I think what really sort of sealed the deal for me in terms of this was something that I needed to pursue seriously was when I went and saw U2 live for the very first time. This would have been around early 2000s. They had that career resurgence around that time. And I was really getting into them, one would argue very late. That was when I decided. I got home that night from that concert and I thought, okay, I really need to, I just felt like it would be a disservice to myself and I'd never be able to live with myself if I didn't pursue this path in terms of songwriting and, you know, trying to figure out who I was, who I am as a singer. So that's really what kicked it off. And, you know, I very tentatively went out and sort of snuck class, went to a karaoke bar by myself to see what I sounded like being, realizing I needed some voice lessons. So then starting to take some voice lessons. And that's sort of what got the ball rolling. And along the way, I've always had this love for 80s music. And I mean, anybody that knows me now, they know that, you know, Aman and his music from the 80s, right? So lots of the music that came out of the new wave era, a lot of those very iconic music acts that came right around the emergence of MTV, you know, Prince, Bruce Springsteen, Madonna, Michael Jackson around that time, George Michael, just to me, like these people, like in terms of the influence that they've had on, you know, what I'm trying to shape in terms of the music I'm creating, they're just these towering presence people throughout just my life and like the soundtrack of my own life. Hence why you've got Bruce right behind me here.
Yeah, of course.
You've got Miss Janet Jackson right behind me as well. So, you know, I try to keep like an open mind, and there's lots of music that I listen to depending on my mood. You know, I can throw on early 90s house music or bubblegum pop, or, you know, I mean, I'm not prone to listening to some early 80s Metallica sometimes as well, but I tend to always gravitate back towards these icons of the 80s. Yeah.
And is that where you picked up your songwriting from? So you got vocal lessons and hung out at the karaoke bar. In terms of the writing, how did that develop?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I can really pinpoint where the songwriting developed. I do remember distinctly, I forget what song it was. Anyway, there was a song. Probably around like 2000s. And I remember not liking it. And I remember thinking, they could have done so much better. Like, I don't like how that line was written. And, you know, this is how I would have sung this line, right? And I remember I was sitting with a friend and we were sitting in a coffee shop and he was like, oh, that actually sounds really good, right? And always along the way, I think this is where I sort of figured it out when I think back. Like somebody would ask me, hey, have you heard this song? And a lot of times I would say no, because most people that I associated with, they're just so much more plugged in than I am, and I'll figure things out after the fact in my own time. But then I would start imagining, I'm like, I haven't heard this song, but this is how I imagine it would sound in my head. So already just by doing that, you start to get like these original ideas of like your interpretation with having no exposure to what the actual song was. so I feel like in some kind of really weird way that sort of got the ball rolling for me in terms of coming up with my own melodies and my own ideas in terms of a sound, and just lyrical ideas that I started to really think about. I mean, I think in terms of direct influences, I think a band like Fleetwood Mac, they've just created some of the most gorgeous melodies, vocal melodies. They've just made some of the most breezy, romantic music out there. And so I really enjoyed listening to that. I really, really enjoy really anthemic music, music that has a purpose to it, very, very strong messages attached to it. Those resonate a lot with me, depending on whatever trials or tribulations I'm going through in my own personal life. So I feel like that's dictated a lot.
I know
I guess
you.
with my own songwriting, like, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask about your own songwriting. Do you come from a melodic place first of all, or is it a lyric, or a mixture of the two, or what's the first thing?
It's a bit of both, to be honest. It's a bit of both. Like a lot of the songs that I've crafted, I'll have a great idea for a message or a lyric that could be the hook of a song,
Mm-hmm.
but then I'll have a really, really cool idea for a melody. And it might take me a minute to sort of realize, why don't you try putting those together?
Right.
Right. So yeah, there's no one real way that I've operated, especially with the songs that I've released to date professionally. Yeah, sometimes I go into a song with a very, very clear idea of what the message of the song is. Other times it's this melody that I just can't stop singing in my head, and then it's like I'm just putting words on top of it, and that sort of starts to take shape into a song. There was something else I was going to add, and I completely missed it.
Maybe it'll come back to you. Shout it out
Yeah.
if it does. The magic of songwriting. But I feel that's yeah, it's always a really hard question to answer anyway, I think. For me, it's always a mixture of different things, and sometimes it just happens, and I don't really know where it's come from. And I was chatting to someone else about this as well. And I think it's always a
Yeah, I mean, oh,
series of
I remember
experience.
what I was going to say. I have that what's that, the voice notes feature on my phone. And
Mm-hmm.
like if I scroll through it, there's just as many little recordings or snippets where I'm just nonsensically humming a tune because I've got
Same.
I got this melody idea that I need to capture in my head. And then there's just as many where I have this great lyric idea that I just need to get down, that I need to get out of my head and onto somewhere I can remember. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, yeah. I interviewed Michael Love Michael the other week, and they were saying that they
Mhm.
use voice notes all the time for all their stuff. So I have the same. I've got a bunch of random things. I'm like, oh, I don't even remember making that, but okay. It's nice if you're out of inspiration. It's nice to come back to them, I guess.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. Absolutely. I've got so many in there that, if ever I lose an idea for a melody, I'm set.
you're set. That's good. Um, so bringing us up to the present day. Um, and so we're going to be playing one of your songs on the show on Glitterbeam, and then
Okay.
uh, podcast and Spotify. So the song out of your back catalogue that we're going to play is No Time. Is that right?
Yeah.
No Time.
Yes, it is.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Um, So that's on the EP that I released, my first EP from 2019 called Day One. I feel like that song is a standout because there's of the 5 songs that are on that EP, each one of them captures a very distinct mood. Um, there's a uplifting, very happy, anthemic, empowering songs. But that one I think is really special because that's the song that you would probably see me it's me singing in the most confrontational, aggressive, you know, the character that I try to sing in is me with a bit of attitude, and really that's conveyed in the lyrics of the song. Like I describe it as a song about establishing your own personal boundaries, whether that's with somebody in your life that is not respecting them, or whatever influence or whatever thing in your life that you realize that is not good for you. It's that sort of declaration where you're saying, I've got no time for you, right? And so that was really the spirit behind what the lyrics of the song were. And really, I mean, uh, at least in my opinion, I think it's really clear that there's a lot of references from one of my favorite artists, Janet Jackson, right? So there's a lot of very control era Janet Jackson production styles that are incorporated in, the like the musicality of the song. And I wanted to do something really, really different with the bridge. So, the bridge is just this repetitive chant that just sort of builds up, and it's this rising crescendo, and the dynamics and the drama just intensifies. So those were some things that I really, really wanted. I wanted to make sure one song on the EP kind of captured some of those pop songs that really had some of that drama and that tension that you heard in a lot of really funky songs from the 80s, primarily from, Michael and Janet Jackson, and anything that Jimmy Jam or Terry Lewis that they worked on.
Mm. Yeah, it's you've got a great bass line in there as well. I really love that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's chat production. So, who do you work with? A particular team? Do you work with different people on the production side of things? How does that all come about?
To date, I've worked with one producer. Um, he's based here in Toronto. His name is Mark Zubek, and he runs Z Records, which is an independent record label. So Mark was actually one of the judges in the singing competition that I was in
Hmm.
a few years prior. And he always told me that he said that you're a pretty good songwriter. So we just kept in touch. He launched this label, and we always kept on each other's radar. And it was around 2017 where I reached out to him and I said, okay, I want to get back into recording again. So the EP, I mean, it's very much a collaboration, right? It was a lot of like moods and ideas and sounds, reference points that I brought, the lyrics, and he helped me realize a lot of that, right? So just finding musical arrangements that would really convey what the spirit or the message of the song was about. And it really helped me because the instrumentation wise and musical theory wise, that's an area that I'm sort of developing a little bit more. So it was really great working with someone like Mark because I was able to sort of give him particular reference points of other artists or other sounds. And he did a pretty good job of being able to like replicate it or just take it to an entirely different level, and finding a lot of beautiful mistakes that neither of us intended to have happen, but it actually worked. And it took some of the tracks to a whole other level. Having said that though, like, again, since being introduced to all the artists and musicians through this community, definitely looking at wanting to collaborate with some other artists that I'm really, really taken notice of because they've just put out some fantastic music.
Yeah, for sure. I think collaboration is a really exciting um, thing that is possible even more so. Or I don't think, I guess it was happening anyway, but I feel like for me, I've never really considered it as much as now. I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, why not collaborate with someone
Mhm.
who lives far away?
I mean, I would imagine that before it was like you'd have to go into a studio, or you'd have to like one person would have to fly out or something like that, and
Yeah,
to at least be in the same city,
yeah,
right? I don't know. But now with everything that's just gone digital and virtual, again, this is one of the positives that have come out of
mm,
this pandemic. It's a weird thing to say, but being able to collaborate from across the pond, across time zones with people, that's
yeah.
great.
And yeah, and part of it, even I think, is just you realizing that you can do it, or like opening that thing in your mind that actually it's possible to connect to people who aren't in the same place as you, and that you can make real
Exactly. And I think,
over the internet.
yeah, and I think collaborating with people, it forces you to grow as an artist, as a songwriter. I think it's a really great way to sort of increase your own repertoire in terms of your own abilities as a songwriter,
Yeah,
you know, having a different approach that somebody else that you may not have entertained before. So,
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, so I'm all for that.
All for the collabs. So speaking of future music, what what are your musical dreams? Those wildest musical dreams. Tell me.
What's my musical dreams?
Yeah.
Um, that at some point Madonna is going to return my calls because her manager for a collaboration. I don't know what her problem is. I'm kidding.
Keep
um,
trying. Keep trying.
I'm persistent. If anything, I am
Consistency is
persistent.
key.
um, yeah, I don't know. I just want to. For me right now, it's really about trying to hone my own abilities as a singer, as a songwriter right now. I mean, my big lofty dream goal is really around live performances. I would love to be able to have the opportunity to like take the ideas that I have of a live interpretation of some of the songs that I've recorded and being able to do it in a way that, I had the budget to be able to do it, right? In front of like a large audience, so like I would love it if I could, even if I was just like the opening act at like one of the premier venues here in Toronto, like the Scotiabank Arena. They call it the Scotiabank Arena. I still call it the Air Canada Center. Anybody who lives in Toronto will understand.
Okay.
Um,
Little little Toronto reference there.
Yeah, yeah. And, I think in terms of recording, just trying to consistently just really create a foundation of music so that I can work towards releasing, another project. And I don't know if that's going to be another string of standalone singles, whether it's going to be another EP or even something that's going to be a full album, which is another sort of pipe dream of mine, which is cool to say because I'm much, much, much closer than I've ever been before towards realizing like the release of a full length album as opposed to an EP. And that's not to say I'm not proud of what I did before, but it's really building on what I've done.
Yeah.
That was a very long way to answer your question.
So go ahead, work on that, and then send me the the finalized version of your dreams. No, that's great. I mean, hey, well, I feel that with every, I don't know if you feel the same, but with every release that you do and everything you put out, you kind of you learn a little bit anyway, and you learn a little bit about what people respond to and what people like, and then you can kind of be like, oh well, maybe I should do a little bit more of this, or maybe, oh, I've done that now. Now I feel I can try something new. And so actually having those big dreams, although they're lovely, it's actually just sort of step by step is what I'm finding anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I love the EP and everything I put out because I think it's a really good representation of just where I'm at in terms of being an artist, right? And it's hard for me to look back on it and not to have a certain amount of fondness because there's things that I listen to that I really, really love that I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a really big part of what my sound is. Then there's other things that I'm like, well, okay, you tried that. But also, again, just really, really being plugged into what other artists as part of this community, what they're doing. One thing I know for sure is that I have a much, much clearer idea in terms of what the next release is going to look like. And that's not even about like the actual creation of a song. It's like the rollout, because, as much as I'm very proud of the EP and the song I put out last year. There weren't a lot of reference points in terms of what are other queer music artists out there doing? How are they releasing this stuff? And now when I go on my Instagram, that's all I see. So it's like I have a very clear idea now what the next rollout for a single or a project is going to look like. So that's encouraging.
Any really top tips in terms of rolling out music if someone's watching this thinking that you've picked up that you want to try, or that you've seen some really good campaigns of that you admire?
Um, I think incorporate as much multimedia as you can. There's
Mm-hmm.
so much, there's so much that's, and I didn't realize it, that we all have at our disposal now, in terms of, cranking out videos, lyric videos, even photographs, at a pretty high quality. I think as an independent artist, I think one of the other professionals that I talked to said, stretch out your releases for as long as you can, to maintain the level of engagement, the level of audience engagement. So it's like, tease the hell out of a release of a song prior to the release date, build up that buzz, do a giveaway, get some merch out there, the release day, try to get as much press as you can, go on podcasts, go on, do interviews wherever you can, and then slowly start to roll out all the other components of that release, whether it's a lyric video, whether it's like actually a fully realized music video, so that the shelf life for a single could potentially, in my mind, before it was only a month, but you could actually stretch that out into a good 3-4 months. And I've seen artists do that. And there's a few artists, like I think last year, one artist in particular, I think it was Gregory Dillon, put out 2 singles, but he stretched out and built such a huge following, and they were fantastic singles, and that culminated into the release of his EP. So, I think that's a really good example of how to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've seen lots of that, and yeah, always picking up little tips from other people. And there's so many different
And
ways.
host your own radio show and podcast.
And that, ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Yeah, funny. Why not? Well, last week I was chatting to Ripley, who we both know, Ripley, the drag queen, and yeah, we're kind of just speaking about how sometimes, when the thing that you actually want to do isn't maybe there, or you're not getting invited to it, you can kind of actually just create your own version of that yourself. So create your own radio show or own playlist. If nobody's adding you to their playlist, create your own and invite people to that, or create your own.
And that's one of the things I think that's one of the most empowering things about this community, because there is very much this do-it-yourself mentality, right? Which I think you have to have when you're an independent artist, right? When I made the decision to record an EP and actually start putting out music professionally, you don't wait around for other people to give you permission. You just sort of take matters into your own hands, and rather than holding on to the pipe dream of maybe there's a label that's going to sign you, and that's not to say that can't happen, right? There's something really cool to see somebody who, they're sort of taking control of what it is that they want their life to look like, and really carving out that path for themselves. And that's really admirable. And I mean, seeing everybody do that in some way, shape, or form, it's super inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And it's encouraging to see, for sure.
Yeah.
The other part of the puzzle, I guess, though, is the audience and the listeners, and not necessarily other musicians as well. Do you feel that you know who your listenership is currently? Are you building upon it, getting to know them a little bit more?
I think so. I mean, I'm not going to lie. A huge chunk of it is the support that this community has sort of shown to each other, right? So, when I look at like my Spotify analytics, and if I see a certain amount of streams coming out of a certain city in the world, I can pinpoint who that is, right? Beyond that, what I'm noticing is that, there's sort of a bit of a domino effect, right? Because as you're starting to get on an artist's radar, that person, whatever fan base they've amassed, they'll start to check you out as well. So, I mean, as it stands right now, the demographic that I record music for, I guess, is very much the demographic that I'm a part of. I sing and I write and I talk about my own experience, and that's very much through the lens of a cisgender gay male, right? So it's very much the pickup that I've received are the outlets and people who are part of this community, and I think that's great. At some point, am I thinking about, oh, well, I should really expand out of that? Perhaps, but I'm actually really happy being being very, very entrenched in this particular community as a music artist.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, same. And I think I'm sure I've said this so many times now, but I mean it. It's the first time that I feel that I've been doing music for a long, long time, and in various different guises and various different settings and stuff. But in terms of putting out my own music, this community is the first time that I've felt like I actually have people who like care about me and kind of that actually are supporting each other. Because I think there can be quite a lot of competitiveness and not feeling that you don't fit into certain groups and stuff in the music scene. And but this experience of this last year has been the opposite of that, and I can't speak highly enough of it. I feel it's been amazing.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I feel like over this past year, there's been this like there's this real sense of like coming into my own, because you're surrounded by all these artists that are, you know, it's not even to say that they're accepting themselves and their queerness. It's like they're full on unabashedly, unapologetically embracing it. And when you see people do stuff like that, it almost like it gives you permission to be able to do that as well. Whereas as opposed to trying to your pigeonhole or conforming outside of a community that is who you are, and trying to fit into the mold of something that doesn't really successfully show who the person that you actually are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for chatting to me about your music inspirations and story. And yeah, really happy to have you on the show and get to know you a little bit more and play your music, of course, as well. So,
Of course, thank you. This was a pleasure.
yeah, no, absolute pleasure. Well, here's to all those dreams, all those various dreams coming true at some point, and yeah, continuing to meet other people in the community and keep on making music as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next for you.
Likewise for you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, good things, I hope. Musical things, anyway. Well, yeah, thank you so
All good
much.
things.
And see you on the musical airwaves.
All right.
Bye bye for now.